sternocleidomastoid's a good one. So you could just have your client lift their head if they're in this position. If you just lift your head off the table, lift your whole head by flexing. I mean, you get a bilateral activation right there. Go ahead and relax. So really easy to find because it's superficial. So sternocleidomastoid also does which direction rotation? Yeah, so I could say contralaterally rotate, so she's rotating that way, and I see the muscle contracting right here. So this is not the way to stretch that one, right? It's shortening that way. So to stretch this one as a flexor and a contralateral rotator, and it also does lateral flexion to the same side. So this is how it's going to shorten. If I added resistance, I could also say, I want to break your headband. I could add resistance here and say, you know, kind of push your head into my hand. And if I do that, it'll fire, but also will everything else on that side of the neck. So to get the SCM to stand out, you use flexion and contralateral rotation. And you don't even have to add resistance in this position. And then to stretch it, I'm sure Lori took you over stretching it. So stretching it, you move it to away from its side, but you have to rotate to the same side. It's kind of a weird position to stretch the right SCM. And then I don't want to lift her head too much because it's a flexor. I want to keep her head in as an extended position as possible. If I lift her head too much, it's going to shorten SCM. And then for splenius, it's hard to kind of palpate it in this position. It's an extensor, but splenius goes to mastoid process. So does SCM. They meet at mastoid process here. So SCM comes from the front to mastoid. Splenius capitis and cervicis go from the back. And so she would need to extend or like push her head into the table. And then everything's gonna fire back there. Semispinalis, upper trapezius, everything. So what you could do instead is, go ahead and relax, but splenius, cervicis, and capitis is an ipsilateral rotator. So if I asked her to kind of push your head into the table, but also rotate to this side, rotate your nose to this side, then I feel like contracting under there. It's an ipsilateral rotator. And relax. And that's nice because upper trapezius is a contralateral rotator, so now I don't have to palpate through it.
So you had her push her head into table and then turn to the
same side to get splenius, capitis, and cervicis to contract, which normally you're not going to have your client push their head into the table and contract them. I'm just checking to see if I was on it or not. And then scalenes. So scalenes are in this triangle here. So scalenes are posterior to SCM, anterior to upper trap, and then they kind of run under, but you find clavicle is the other border. So they run from transverse processes. So transverse processes are really hard to find, but if you can find mastoid process, you know, they're on the lateral neck. So they're running from, you know, just find mastoid process, and transverse processes are, you know, down from there. And then so scalenes are going from transverse process to the first and second rib, which is right underneath the clavicle. And so to, you know, I think the easiest place is to just find the clavicle. My nails are long, I'm not going to dig in, but kind of push in there. And then if your client, just close your mouth and inhale through your nose, big breath. That usually engages the scalenes as an accessory muscle of respiration, and they will contract.
Oh, cool.
I could also add some resistance and have her try to kind of laterally flex, not rotate, but laterally flex. So you're gonna try to kind of go like that. They are lateral flexors, but other muscles are also lateral flexors. So scalene's gonna try to help, upper trapezius is gonna help. So usually they use respiration to try to find scalenes. So if you're trying to stretch Okay, so let's go back to splenius capitis. It's an extensor. It's an ipsilateral rotator. So if I want to stretch splenius capitis, I can do some flexion because it's an extensor. It's also going to do lateral flexion to this side, so I'm going to laterally flex this way, trying to lengthen splenius capitis. It's an ipsilateral rotator, so if I'm trying to stretch the muscle on the right, I'm going to have her contralaterally rotate, and then I can add some flexion too. So that's different than like making sure I'm not flexing and rotating this way for SCM. So kind of really subtle differences in how you move the head are going to have a big impact on what muscles lengthening.
Sorry.
And then you can intensify the stretch too, like if you're trying to stretch scalene. Okay, so scalene's a lateral flexor. Some of them flex, some of them don't. They have a little bit of contralateral rotation, not much. So scalenes, you're pretty much going to stretch the same way as SCM, where you're going to laterally flex. If I'm trying to stretch right scalenes, you can laterally flex. You can ipsilaterally rotate a little bit. You want to try not to flex the neck, and then you can have your client exhale, like take a deep breath, exhale, try to really flatten your rib cage. And I'm not moving her head very much, but if I had her neck in a pretty good stretch, then as she exhaled and the ribs went down, she might feel the stretch increase. Or you can just do that yourself if you're trying to stretch your scalenes and you're sitting here. If I'm trying to stretch this side, I can move this way. I could look this way a little bit. I could extend a little bit. And then if I exhaled, is this what Lindsay calls the exorcist stretch?
I don't know.
What?
It's like, you know, if you exhaled, you could intensify the stretch a little bit. Oh, and then levator scapula. So if you're trying to find levator scapula, I have nails and no glide. So sorry.
I
But
can flip over.
You know, if you get your hands underneath, like normally how you put your hands all the way underneath and like run your fingers up the spine. If you can find kind of the superior angle, under your shirt, how better slide. If you can sort of find where the superior angle would be, if you're trying to find levator scapula, it's kind of going from superior angle, it's coming up to transverse processes. And if you go in your triangle, if you find upper trapezius and you're kind of coming up in the triangle on the way to mastoid process, but not quite, kind of in the middle, is levator scapula. And here, if you're trying to stretch it, it's not as much of a rotator. So you would just do lateral flexion, find where you think it is, but then you could push the person's shoulder down or have them, you know, say reach your hand towards your foot, and that way you get a better stretch. So all of these muscles, kind of knowing where they are and adding little subtle, you know, pushing here or having them exhale or how you're rotating the neck makes a difference on how they're, you know, what muscles being lengthened or shortened. Let's see. What other muscles do we do? Obliques.